For me to be here before you this morning. I am Pastor Megan Owens, and I want to welcome you to the Pilgrim Congregational United Church of Christ. Whoever you are and wherever you are on life's journey, you are most welcome here. And it is delightful to be here this morning, especially because I had a quick trip to DC last week, and although it was beautiful and wonderful and full of family and friends and beloveds, I did miss all of you last Sunday, I promise, and throughout the week, but it's nice to be home. I want to especially welcome visitors this morning. We are so happy you're here with us, and I want to welcome you to fellowship time after the service. Just down this hall to the left for coffee and treats. If nature should call, it's just down this hall to the right. And we have a special visitor this morning, a special treat, singing Panis Angelicus, and she really has the voice of a beautiful angel. Isabel Romero is here, and so I know that you are going to enjoy our special music this morning, and thank you, Lizzie, for bringing her to us, and we hope she will come again, I'm just saying. And I would like to say, if it's okay with the parents and teacher and Amira, that we have the kids stay so they can hear her. I think that would be a lovely thing. And on that note, I invite you all to take a deep breath and consider what brought you here this morning to this beautiful space to worship our amazing God together with these wonderful people as our candles are lit and we begin our worship.
Good morning and welcome to worship. My name is Laura Lynn. Please stand as you are able for our opening litany. For everything there is a season. Very little is good or bad. It is more often a question of who and of when, a why or a how.
There are times for the birth of something new. There are times to welcome death. There are times to plant seeds for those to come, and times for harvesting the long labor of others. There are times when destruction is necessary, or at least unavoidable, and there are times when healing is possible. There are times to create art, and times to tear it down. There are days when only weeping will do, others for laughing. Some days we can only mourn, others we dance. We ebb and flow our way in community. Sometimes we long to be in the arms of another, other times we need the intimacy of solitude. There are times when some of us need to be silent, and times when the rest of us must speak. Love has its time, and hate has its place. Conflict must be accepted, and peace welcomed in due time. May we listen our way into and out of each season, with wisdom as our guide, forcing nothing outside of this time, receiving everything for what it is, trusting
trusting love's companionship, laboring toward liberation together. Please remain standing for our opening hymn, number 179 in the NCH hymnal, We Yearn, O Christ, for Wholeness.
Please be seated. So it's the time in our service where, welcome, friend, Cora. Cora, our introvert. And good morning to you. And good morning, everyone. Wow, so welcome all of you, young chronologically, and I always invite the young at heart as well. So we now have our time for the young chronologically and young at heart. So I've been thinking about a word that we use a lot in church, and it's peace. We talk about wanting to bring God's peace. We talk about peace on earth. And I just thought I would read a few of the ideas about peace from the kids in this book, A Million Visions of Peace, Wisdom from the Friends of Old Turtle. And then I want to get some of your ideas about what you think peace means. Oh, what does peace mean? Right away. Yes, a peace is when something breaks. Yes, and we have pieces. That's true. I was not clear enough about what kind of peace I meant. But that is absolutely true. Sometimes things fall in pieces, and can we put them back together sometimes? No? That's okay. Sometimes there are sad days when the things break and we can't put them back together, like Humpty Dumpty. Yeah, maybe. Couldn't put Humpty together again. So I saw a few in here that I really thought were kind of fun. What is peace? Peace begins in each person's heart and then is passed on to the people they love most. Then everyone they pass it on to until everyone has peace in their heart. That's kind of a nice idea about peace, don't you think? If I want to make a new friend, I say hi and I smile. Everyone should try it. What do you guys think about that? Is saying hi and smiling at a new person a way to bring peace? Mm-hmm. And let's see. My vision for peace is that all the boys and girls in the world are my friends. Peace means to me like a big hand, and each finger is a different country. I like that one. I think my vision for peace is if everyone would think of themselves as dinosaurs, and if we keep fighting, we will soon be extinct. That one's kind of funny and not. Be a peacemaker. So, what does peace mean to you? What do you think about peace? Because you always have some when you're breaking something. This is true. Yes.
It's like there are conflicts, but you smooth them over and you find a way to work through that, or you find a way to help other people, and then they'll maybe help you back.
I like that. When there are conflicts sometimes and you find a way to smooth them over and work together, and people might help you and you can find a way to help them back, and you can kind of find maybe a common ground to be in together. Did you have something, Cora?
So it's like when you're not fighting and you're all just getting along.
When you're not fighting and getting along. Is peace something you can find by yourself? If you're kind of having she says no, she says yes, maybe so. Maybe like if you're having a really bad day. And I used to go to my room and sit and listen to loud music. And I used to like to go sit in a tree. And it would help me find peace because I would breathe more easily and I would be able to get a little calmer. Yeah.
Sometimes your emotions or how you feel is just raging inside of you, and you can find a place that makes you feel safe and calm down. And that's peace.
Yeah. When you're
Just like on your scarf.
on my scarf? Is there peace on my scarf of all the people?
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, sometimes when our emotions are raging and we can find a safe place, I think peace is about wholeness. And I'm going to teach you a word that you might have heard before. It's shalom. Shalom. Shalom is a Hebrew word, and sometimes it means hey, hi. When people say hello in Hebrew, it's how is your shalom? And sometimes, but shalom means peace, but it also means wholeness. It means finding a safe place to breathe and be calm when we need to. It means smiling at the new person and making new friends. And it means doing what we can in our way to help smooth things over maybe and find a new way of doing things. So I am going to wish you all shalom this morning and remind you that you are whole and you are beautiful just as you were made in God's image. And I want you to look around you and see all these beautiful people who are here to remind you of that if you ever should forget it. And I'm going to remind you that there is Sunday school and nursery, but I welcome you to stay through the prayers that we're going to have in just a minute so you can listen to Isabel sing. And then go down to Sunday school and nursery. Amen. And this is the time in our service, or not. Okay, they have spoken through their actions. It is the time in our service where We lift up those things in our lives that are joyful and those things that are difficult to God together. And we begin with our joys. Are there any joys this morning? Yes.
I think we had a really successful soup sale yesterday, thanks to everybody. I think we came in a little more than 60% more than last year, and the raffle was successful, so good. And we have dry soup for sale for the rest of, until it's gone.
Dry soup for sale for the rest of the year, I think. Yes, and it's really good. I'm guessing. I took some home yesterday. That was a joyful day yesterday for sure. Any other joys? Yes, Tara.
I hate to embarrass my sister, but Paula's here today. Thanks to
Indeed a joy. Welcome home, Paula. It's wonderful to have you with us today in person. Any other joys this morning? Are there any concerns this morning, any of those things weighing on our hearts that we would like to lift up? Well, I will lift up Kate and Steve. And I will lift up Tara. Any other sharing this morning? Then let us lift these things. We lift up Kate and Chris. We lift up the Nelson family. And let us lift all of these things, those things that we share aloud and those things that we whisper in our hearts up to the one who knows what we need before we ask. Gracious God of love and presence, we thank you for the wondrous abundance in our lives, those things that we know each day and are thankful and grateful for, even if they seem to slip in unnoticed. We thank you for the beautiful weather. We thank you for the cool nights. We thank you for the beautiful creation that is all around us each day, and for each new day that we can be part of it. We thank you for the joys lifted up today. We know that you dance with us. We also lift up those who are in pain, for those who are struggling, for those who are facing diagnoses, surgeries, for those who are ill, and for the caretakers. We lift up all those who are grieving. We know that you sit with us in difficult times, and we know your presence through the presence of those who accompany us. We lift up those who are hungry, those who seek shelter, those who are in despair. We know that they too are your children and you accompany them. May we know and be thankful for the fact that we are your hands in your world. And whatever we do in that world that uplifts your desire for justice and restoration, no matter how small it may seem to us, transforms the world. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
This morning's scripture is from Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 through 40. You have heard that it was said, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do you greet only your brothers and sisters? What more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same?
It's funny, sometimes when I'm sitting there listening to these difficult passages, I say to myself, technically you are allowed to skip those and move on to something a little more seemingly uplifting. But as usual, I think that Jesus has an important lesson for us, and I like to grapple with those seemingly difficult passages. And as I was grappling with this one, I was thinking about that Bette Midler song, From a Distance. And I was thinking about a friend of mine, a musician, who used to play it for worship at the church where I grew up. And we used to talk about it, about how we have this issue of this idea of from a distance. Because although it might be from a distance that we feel like she can cope about the difficult things in the world like hunger and war and bombs and need, it isn't from a distance that we respond to them. And I guess for me the most problematic piece of the song is where she sings, God is watching us from a distance. And I think her point is that God is watching us. God is aware of us. But I just can't get over the fact that I don't think God is watching us from a distance. Because I believe, of course, that God is always walking among us. Nevertheless, I think this song is an interesting one. And she goes over the beauty of the world and the light and the blue water and the white-capped mountains and this beautiful home we inhabit. And she talks about how from a distance the world is blue and green, and I'm thinking about early images from space, and it makes me think about all the beautiful images that we are getting now from space that are changing the way we think about our universe and the beauty of the stars. And this, of course, is physical distance. What does something look like from far away physically? From a distance, there's harmony and it echoes through the land. And this too might be a physical distance, but I wonder if it isn't a spiritual distance. For those of us who can put physical distance between ourselves and some of the difficult things in the world. Because she goes through the general social ills of hunger and war and violence, and from this distance it seems like we all have enough. But perhaps it is in this space between that we find the voice of hope, the voice of peace, the voice of everyone. For isn't that what we all strive for? Hope, peace, and a voice for everyone. And then she sings, from a distance you look like you're a friend, even though we're at war. And from a distance I just can't comprehend what all this fighting is for. And again, things look harmonious from far away, but up close we begin to see the cracks and the realities of violence and suffering in the world, and the realities that we need to address. And it is one thing to claim to want to end to war, to accept others as they are, to feed the hungry and make sure everyone is healthy and housed. All these things are easy to want from a distance. But not much happens to address them unless we decide to close the distance and begin together to work for restoration. And it has always seemed to me that the closer we come to the realities of our human so-called enemies, the less like enemies they appear. When we see humanity, even in those we are taught to hate, maybe because they hate us or they are danger or they started it after all, we see a new perspective and we can see God's image. Maybe what Bette Midler is getting at in this song is that we need to pause and think about the ways that we see things and creation and people and peoples, and consider what we see and how and why. At the core of all of it is hope of everyone, which is peace, the love of loves, the comfort that we are spiritually accompanied. I think that this is also what Jesus is getting at today as he tells us, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. If we love and pray for those who seem to be our enemies, we can no longer ignore their humanity or that God minds their well-being. Jesus says this as a twist on loving your neighbor. Don't just love your neighbor, but love those who aren't like you. Here is an invitation to consider who ultimately our neighbor is. The ones who are like us and the ones who love us, or those other people over there who we contemplate from a distance. To love my enemy and to pray for those who persecute me is so foreign a concept that we try to press it into boxes that we can understand. We say, sure, we can pray for those who persecute us from over here, but don't get close. Don't close the distance or consider why persecution exists. Black jazz musician Daryl Davis decided to close the distance one evening after sharing an unexpected drink after a set with a Ku Klux Klan member. And he has spent 30 years talking to members of the Klan and dismantling their ideology. He has 200 rows of Klansmen who left the Ku Klux Klan because they could no longer support its ideology. He says, Daryl Davis says, when two enemies are talking, they're not fighting. It's when the talking ceases that the ground becomes fertile for violence. If you spend 5 minutes with your worst enemy, it doesn't have to be about race, it could be about anything. You will find that you both have something in common. As you build upon those commonalities, you're forming a relationship. And as you build about that relationship, you're forming a friendship. That's what would happen. I didn't convert anybody. They saw the light and converted themselves. One of his examples was being in the car, driving along with one of these Klansmen, and this guy from the Ku Klux Klan said, well, you know that, black people have a gene for violence. And Daryl looked at him and said, man, I've never been violent to anybody. And this guy said, well, it's latent. So Daryl said, well, white men have a gene for being serial killers. And the Klansman goes, what? And he said, name me 3 black serial killers. And he couldn't do it. And then Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, Charles Manson. That was the conversation that made this Klansman pause and go, because he goes, that's just stupid. I'm not violent. And Daryl Davis says, well, it's just latent in you. And he goes, no, that's dumb. And Daryl says, yeah, it's dumb. Just like what you said to me is dumb. And that was the kind of conversation that he had with people. And I think his journey shows how enemies are constructed and how they can be deconstructed. They are constructed through dehumanizing on the one side, perhaps constructing fear through violence on the other, and perhaps dehumanizing in this way is not one-sided dynamic as this example I'm showing you, but the same ideological process is in play. We must define and destroy the enemy. Is it black people? Is it white guys, those serial killers? Is it Muslim terrorists or Mexicans? Is it white kids who shoot up schools? Is it communism or fascism or some other ism? The basis of enemy creation is always fear. That fear is poison that we drink expecting it to kill our enemies. I filched that from the Buddha, really, who had a similar quote about anger. That anger is poison that we drink thinking it's going to harm someone else. And Nelson Mandela played on that idea during Restoration period in South Africa, during reparations there. He said resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. And Mandela knew a little bit about having enemies. And yet he knew that his resentment in the end would only poison the one who harbors it. When he was in a position to be vengeful and punitive, he was not. He worked instead for a greater good of his country and his future through restoration. He didn't excuse violent actions that upheld apartheid or defend them, but he recognized, perhaps, that true justice is about restoring what is needed for the injured party. One of the most amazing stories I've heard about that time in South African history was a woman who was testifying before the South African Truth and Reconciliation Committee, and the person on trial was a man who had killed many people, including her whole family, her sons and her husband. And they left it up to her what his punishment would be. And she said, you have taken my sons from me, so you will be my son. You will come once a week and visit with me, and you will help me do the things that need doing as a son would do. And the man didn't hear it because he had fainted away. But we who are set up to think about punishment and vengeance as justice cannot understand her. And yet, what she was saying is, I need to be restored. I need to be made whole, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I'm wondering if this man felt a little bit uncomfortable if he didn't change his own ideology a little bit. Because true justice maybe is about wholeness and not vengeance. On my recent trip home to Washington, D.C., I got a lift back to the airport from my dad's, And my driver was an Afghan. He had worked for the State Department in the former government. And he was a Hazara, a group of people that live on the steppes in the central part of Afghanistan. He said that Hazara means 1,000 because Genghis Khan left 1,000 soldiers when he went through that way, and so here they are. And I asked him how Afghans felt about the Taliban, and was it mixed? And he said yes. And then he told me an age-old story, and it wasn't about religious suppression, but about racial superiority. That really the Taliban's power was because that most of them are from a certain other tribal group, and that tribal group wants government authority, and if they can use the Taliban to do it, they will. And that's more important than the form of government it takes. And he said some of this other ethnicity that would have worked for the United States or were in the former government were still working there and were safe due to who they were. I found that interesting. And because we had that conversation, I better understood who that enemy was, not him, personally, but the human story behind an enemy's face. The nuances of human experience in the place that created that particular enemy, the Taliban. The nuances of human experience that create like extremists around the world. And I thought about the racial component of the Israel-Palestinian divide, and which is also seen as about religion. And I think about the Troubles in Ireland, and was it religious or was it English versus Native Irish? And I think about issues here in the United States, and the core of the issues start to overwhelm me, and I think about what Jesus says, and I think about one of my favorite bumper stickers that simply says, when Jesus told us to love our enemies, I think he meant not to kill them. And some days that's as far as I can go. Can those of us who move through spaces of privilege, that's certainly me, in some way do this without paternalism when trying to help people or solve things? I think praying is a deep kind of listening. Pray for your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Praying is a deep kind of listening, and perhaps loving our enemies and praying for those who persecute us starts a process that teaches us deep listening. So that when we're Daryl Davis, the black musician, in a car with a Klans person, we can do deep listening, and maybe his energy rubbed off in the deep listening department. I think about the rise in anti-Semitism in the United States recently, in our own community even. And I think about my beautiful godchildren and their mother, my dear childhood friend Miriam, who I got to see this weekend, who are Muslim. And when I hear people say things like Muslims go home, and Miriam says, where am I supposed to go? I was born here. This is my home. And I think about all those forms of that. And I've been reading a book by a young woman, Cole Arthur Riley. She started something called Black Liturgies on Instagram. I encourage you to look it up. But in her book, This Here Flesh, she says, you might think justice is a form of choosing sides, choosing whom to stand behind. In a way, maybe it is. But justice doesn't choose whose dignity is superior. It upholds the dignity of all those involved, no matter whom it offends or what it costs. Even when demanding retribution, justice does not demean the offender's dignity, it affirms it. It communicates that what has been done is not what the offender is made for. They too were made for beauty. In justice, everyone becomes more human. Everyone bears the image of the divine. Justice does not ask us to choose. When one wonders, finally becoming exhausted of their when wounders, finally becoming exhausted of their dominion, dismantle their delusion of heroism and victimhood and begin to tell the truth of their offense, a sacred rest comes available to them. You are no longer fighting to suspend the delusion of self. You can just lie down and be in your own flawed skin. And as you rest, the conscience you were born with slowly begins to regenerate and your mobility changes. It's not only a relief, it's freedom. Perhaps musician Daryl Davis has 200 clan coats because he was able to see the humanity in the Klansmen. But through the conversations they had with Davis, the white supremacists chose to put down their need for dominion and victimhood.
Okay, time's up.
It sure is for all of us, I think. It takes both. It takes both of these things for true restoration and true justice and true tough love to prevail in our messy, chaotic world that creates fearful systems with bottom lines. Not all of us have cut and dried spaces to work in. We often walk lines of privilege and lines of disempowerment or layers of each in the same body. We all have different shades of work to do when we talk about enemies, tough love, and avoiding drinking the poison. I really wanted to write Kool-Aid. As the song says, in this work we are all instruments. And maybe it helps if we are not instruments from a distance, but in the same space, playing without fear, loud, squeaky, practicing, improving, sublime, and beautiful. We are instruments playing in the same band, playing songs of hope, playing songs of peace, playing the song of everyone. Because in the end, that is the hope of hopes, the love of loves, the heart of everyone. Amen. So I am going to invite you to stand for our next hymn, which is in the bulletin in the insert. And we're going to go through the first verse because we sung it before, but Sherry says it's been a while. So please stand as you are able. And Sherry's going to play out the first verse, and then she's going to go back and add the beautiful accompaniment, and we will sing all 4 verses.
We are invited to repay the grace we have received with our resources, time, abilities, compassion from a deep and wide place of gratitude. These gifts are for prophecies, dreams, and hopes of the future from all your children. Be generous, my friends, with repaying, repraising, repairing. Will the ushers please come forward to collect the offering? God, you who have everything, we bring our offering and enter your spirit. This is your generosity to us. We can share with you in the giving and receiving of gifts. May these be blessed for each use, and may we be blessed by letting go of plenty and learning need. Amen.
Please be seated. So I have two announcements, and then I'm going to hand it to Pam. Now, SCJC.
I gave everybody.
You gave everybody, never mind. I will call your attention to the thing Pam gave you. I want to just thank you. Pam lifted this up as a joy, and it certainly was a joy. Yesterday we did our Soup for the Soul distribution, and we were buzzing with volunteers, and thank you for all of you who came and helped yesterday, and thank you for all of you who made this soup.
Heather and Randy get superstars for all of this. Randy for keeping the stuff all together and making sure it got where it needed, and Heather Hennessy for cooking all the soup. And for those of you who came and put together the jars of the dry soup, and for Pam who just organized all of it with Sue's help, and
the cookies.
the cookies. Thank you, Paula, for organizing the cookies, and they all came and put together cookie boxes, and we all had a lovely day yesterday. And thank you for the shadow chalk with the kids that were there, and it was a beautiful day, and I am very grateful for what a success it was, and it shows what we can all do when we come together and do it all together. And I do want to remind you that the memorial service for Leon Nelson, our Leon, will be today here at 2 p.m. and all are invited. So, and yes, Pam has passed out 2 events that are happening that may be of interest to you, so please take note of those. Anything else for the good of the order? Then I invite you to stand as you are able for our closing hymn, We Are Your People, in the Black hymnal, verses 1, 3, and 6. And now go, knowing that you are loved, knowing that you carry love into the world. Go in peace, serve the Lord, you are free. And may we gather in our beautiful circle as we send one another out into the week.
With you.